On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, it takes two to tango. As Chinese Premier Li Keqiang meets with German Chancellor in Berlin, could the two countries dance to the same tune?
Because historically the Silk Road has been there between China and Arab Muslim.
And the Arab League Secretary General talks exclusively to CGTN about building better cooperation between China and the Arab countries. Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live on CGTN. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has arrived in Germany for the fifth round of China-Germany intergovernmental consultations with Chancellor Angela Merkel, and they just wrapped up a joint press conference. This is Li's fourth official visit to the country, but the first visit to Germany after the two countries' new cabinets took office in March. What could we expect from the visit? Before our discussion, take a look at this.
The second time in 2 months for Premier Li and Ms. Merkel's meeting. Li is doing the rounds in Germany after his visit to Bulgaria. He had a meeting with the heads of the government of 16 countries of Central and Eastern Europe within the 16+1 platform and signed a number of bilateral agreements with Bulgaria. Li addressed the business forum of the China Central and Eastern Europe Summit. He hailed the long history of cooperation between China and the region and reassured partners that China will continue its reform and opening up in a world of growing unilateralism.
In particular, in the first 5 months of this year, the trade between our two sides rose by 24.5%, and it also shows the tremendous untapped potential in our business cooperation, because China believes in multilateralism and world multipolarity. Europe is an important pole in the international landscape for peace and development.
This speech was delivered a day after the U.S. and China slapped tariffs on $34 billion worth of each other's imports. Central and Eastern Europe countries agreed it's important to uphold multilateralism and free trade to continue the current momentum of global economic recovery. Also, China and Germany, as the largest economies on both sides of the Eurasian continent, seek to strengthen cooperation amid the complex and volatile international situation.
Visiting Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and German Chancellor Angela Merkel held a joint conference just now in Berlin. Li said that during the China-Germany intergovernmental consultations with Mrs. Merkel, that trade and multilateralism was important. Besides discussing trade, Li and Merkel witnessed the signing of deals involving the agriculture and auto sector between the two countries. China agreed to reopen its market to imported German poultry, while Chinese battery maker would build a battery plant in central Germany. Later today, on Monday, Li and Merkel were to visit the Sino-German Economic and Technological Cooperation Forum and visit an exhibition involving autonomous driving. To find out more about the discussion related to China-Germany relations and what can the two countries do together in order to revive the world economy, despite of its recent challenges, I'm joined here in Beijing by Ms. Jin Keyu, who is an associate professor of economics from the London School of Economics. Good to see you in Beijing,
Very
Jin.
nice to see you too.
Good to see you. And also joining us in Prague, we have Jeremy Garlick, who is a lecturer of international relations from the University of Economics in Prague. Welcome as well, Jeremy. Let me begin with you, Keyu, about the latest development. Obviously, the two sides, China, Germany, already talked businesses. They didn't wait much, particularly given the fact that China and the United States is having an apparent trade war, while the U.S. was also punishing its trade allies, such as Germany, on some of the issues.
It is actually quite a unique opportunity for China to really pull in some of Americans' allies to build that relationship and strengthen the European-Chinese relationship on trade, on investment, on technology. So I think it's a golden opportunity, in fact.
But having said that, though, Keyu, if I could go a little bit specific with you, if you talk about investment, China wanted to be a stable framework for Chinese business to invest in both Germany and certainly in other European countries. Well, Germany, on the other hand, want to protect its own technologies. They say, oh, well, we still want to maintain our advantage in this regard. How could that work out?
Well, first of all, under WTO guidelines, it is all fair play to have mutual interest in technological sharing and the sharing of markets. And you know, as China has a huge amount of domestic saving, why would they want to invest, you know, attract foreign investment if it doesn't you know, offer certain key technologies? So I think it's under the right kind of cooperation. You know, and they also offer very complementary technologies and work together.
All right, Mr. Garlick, Professor Garlick, I just love that family name, by the way. Mr. Garlick, help us understand. Be a little bit spicy if you want to, sir. Tell us about, from the Europeans' perspective, how is that going to work out between China and the European countries? Both about market entry, but at the same time with the backdrop of dramatic change in trade.
That's an excellent question, and I think it's a very difficult question to answer. I could give a very long answer, but I'll try to keep it short. I think the question, you know, obviously with the U.S.-China, you know, sort of trade war that's been stimulated by Donald Trump, we have a changed situation. The question is in Europe whether Europeans are going to be willing to work on improving deals with China, because what we've seen is recently an offer from China to cooperate, you know, on trade and other issues in the World Trade Organization, perhaps you know, to combat the American initiatives. But the European Union at least has rebuffed it so far. So there's a question whether this can be overcome and whether Europeans are going to be willing to work on a deeper level with China. I think what we see with Germany is that at the bilateral level, the Germans are certainly willing to, you know, do business with China, but will this cause problems at the level of the whole European Union?
Right.
This is the question.
But apparently, Ke Yu, it seems that the discussion between the two sides, China and also Germany, has already created some fruits about investment of battery companies, about auto, and also about agricultural products, as we earlier indicated.
So yes, because China and Germany can really work.
Yeah.
Ke Yu, go ahead.
On a lot of economic and business relationships, because they are complementary. Their trade would be complementary, and actually in terms of technology, we know that the Chinese market is a huge area for technological development, but it's a very different kind of technology compared to the kind of technology that Germany has been pushing for. So there's a lot of room for complementarity.
Having said that, though, it is really not just about bilateral, you know, trade deals on this sector or that one, but rather how to realign the thinking and the ideas behind the trade practices these days. Therefore, Jeremy, let me ask you about that too. About the international trade system. Does the European Union have some fresh ideas that can be tested out with other trading partners such as China, bilaterally or multilaterally?
Again, I'd say that's an excellent question, and that, for me, that's the biggest issue here, is the European Union level. You asked, do they have any fresh ideas? I think the problem at the moment is no, they don't. I think at the level of individual countries, such as Germany, we've seen, you know, that China can do deals with Germany, and Angela Merkel is very open to that. But at the EU level, there's a lack of initiative coming from that level. There's a lack of dynamism coming from that Europe-wide level. So it may be that, you know, the best chances of progress are more with bilateral dealing than at the EU level, unfortunately, in my opinion.
And also joining us now, we have from Brussels, Nicholas White, who is a Senior Director at APCO's Brussels office. Mr. White, welcome to our program. Since we're talking about the EU, you are there in Brussels. You probably have a better judgment than all of us about new ideas about trade. Is there any, briefly?
Well, I'm not only here in Brussels, but I was actually in Bulgaria last week, and I attended both of the Premier Li's meetings with both the Bulgarian government and with the Eastern European countries on Friday and Saturday. So I've been quite close to this as it's been developing. The most striking thing that Premier Li said in Bulgaria was that China has come to support the European Union and effectively not to divide it. I found that really interesting, that China was pushing against the narrative that it is only interested in dividing and ruling, that there's a real commitment to come in solidarity and in solidity to overcome the dangers that are posed by the threatened American trade war. And I think Europeans are very interested in that. And I think it's interesting now that Premier Li is in Germany, whereas in fact it is the Germans who are famously the most concerned about the possibility of escalation of trade relations between Europe and America, and are perhaps the most reluctant to take it any further. So I think that we're now seeing that this dialogue has been raised from the purely theoretical into something very practical indeed.
Something very practical indeed as well from China's side possibly. For example, Belt and Road Initiative. If you think about that idea, that initiative that has been put out for there quite some time, but there's still a lot of different understanding about exactly what China has in mind. Is that a strategy? Is that the way China tried to roll its map all over the world? Ke Yu, about that, what do you make of those suspicions? And as long as there's a prolonged period of suspicion, any new ideas can be implemented at all.
People have a profound misunderstanding about what the Belt Road is really about. And it is really about establishing a new global platform for global project cooperation that pushes for win-win solutions. Let's face it, the world needs more infrastructure, and the developing countries need to rise to prosperity, and infrastructure is a great way. China's providing that initial thrust of building that platform as offering a new model for global cooperation, and that is not perceived that way through the economics, but through the politics. And I think that people need to change that view sooner or later.
But what exactly is that model that you're talking about, Ke Yu? You have to be very specific here. You can't just throw a few big words to us.
I'm glad you asked me that question. Infrastructure is a network, and you need to build that entire infrastructure network by helping these smaller countries without the capability to build infrastructure. You also need a big country like China to absorb the liquidity risk, financial risk, operational risk, and also provide the initial finances, but also in collaboration with international participants. Germany, UK on technology, logistics, financial innovation. There is actually a lot to offer, but they need to emphasize it's a global platform.
It is a global platform, and it's supposed to be about projects. People bring their own advantages together, do it together, share together, eventually the result. Mr. White, though, as that idea is still being questioned and tested, when do you think the new ideas can be worked out for an important time such as right now, when people have so much questions about the international trade system, about the international economic growth possibilities? Mr. White.
Yeah, if we're talking about the development side of things, then I think it's a learning process all around. China has had an extremely good 10-15 years of development investment in Africa, and you know, for anybody who knows Africa, it's been extraordinary, the transformation that has been brought there to a very large extent with Chinese help. Europe is a different matter, and I think that China is still learning the way in which it's easiest to and best to engage with the European countries. It's quite striking that if you look at the Chinese investments in the 16 Eastern European countries, the one country that has received the most investment is actually Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is the country with the most devastated economy, the one that was most badly affected by the wars of the 1990s. Chinese investment there is about twice as much as in the Czech Republic, which is the second most. So I think there's an element of looking for adapting the Chinese model to countries that already have fairly well developed economies, and also countries that are operating within the European Union framework, which of course Bosnia is not as yet.
All right.
So I see this as a process that's just beginning. But if I can say one more thing, I think part of the suspicion has been that we've had this discussion about China increasing its investment in Europe through the Belt and Road Initiative for some time now, and the money has not really started to flow just yet. So I think we've seen quite a lot of promises from the Chinese side, and some people are still, some of my Eastern European friends are saying to me, yes, well, that's all very well to have made these promises, but when are we going to start seeing actual results? So I think that's a reputation risk that China currently must navigate.
Since Nicholas talked about the money, Keqiang, I want to ask you about this. There seems to be different concerns coming from different sides. China just thinking, why no participation or no more participation? The others are thinking, where's the money? And how much will the money keep on popping in? So how should we understand this? It seems that there are different expectations from different sides.
There are two issues with the current status of the project. Number one is there is still a lack of full coordination to bring together all these actors. But even more importantly, there is not a really centralized data center. I've talked to lots of commercial banks in China that have done the projects, a lot of funds that have already implemented the project, spent a lot of the money, but there is no centralized system telling us where it went and how it happened. So that's another, just kind of from a statistical point of view, a lack of institutionalized, centralized effort.
Maybe on certain issues things are already done, and yet those information are not being spread around and shared because it is not necessarily a system that has already got all the sides into consideration. Jeremy, do you agree with that?
Yes, I think those are some very good points, and I would say that there needs to be a greater transparency on the investment side. Here in, I'm in Central Europe, I'm in the Czech Republic, and here there's been a lot of debate about the Chinese investments here, and there have been some problems with it, and I think what is needed is a really greater transparency of communication about the investments, and also much more specific information about how the money is going to be invested, what the plans are. Here in the Czech Republic we had a promise of investment 2 years ago, and a lot of people are asking, what are the results of it? We haven't seen that many, specific results, and some of the things that were supposed to be done have resulted in some political problems here, which I won't go into the details of, but more specifics are needed, and more clarity, more transparency, I would say.
You talk about you would not go into details, but the details are actually where the devils are, right? You think about that. That's also one of the concerns. On the other hand, from Chinese investors, they say, if we invest our money over there, we started this huge projects over there, but at the end of the day, when administrations changes, when even local government changes in some of those countries, things just gone, and everything has to be done from scratch again. That is not the best environment to attract the investors, Chinese investors included. Jeremy.
Yeah, again, a very good point. One thing that that I noticed very clearly, I've noticed in the last year, is that Chinese investment is pouring in much larger quantities into Western Europe, as we see now with the visit, Premier Li's visit to Germany. You see much larger volumes of investment in Germany. And why is that? Because Germany is simply more attractive to Chinese investors. The Central and Eastern European countries, what can they offer to China? What is China supposed to invest in? And I think that's a very good question. What are the Central and Eastern European countries offering to China? The Western European countries being more developed industries are more attractive, obviously. The Central and Eastern Europeans need to work out, and China also needs to work out where the investment opportunities are in Central and Eastern Europe, because I think at the moment it's not clear at all.
So also lack of clarity. Keqiang?
I would put it the other way. It's actually, you need to take a country like China to be able to invest in countries that are not immediately obviously attractive, just like the U.S. Put a disproportionate amount in NATO, holding up that alliance for the benefit of others. That's why you need China on a Belt Road project to absorb this initial risk for the global economic win-win platform.
And of course, we also want to have others to contribute to this project, because it's a project for everybody, not just for China. That has to be very clear. Before we go, ladies and gentlemen, we had a wonderful discussion, but this discussion is taking place with the backdrop, as I mentioned at the very beginning of it, that when the international trade system is under threat, by some of the original founders of that system. And also people do not know where to go as the so-called apparent trade wars are going on right here. So what can be the role? If you think about these ideas, these initiatives, eventually lead to the, in a way, an updated version of the international system, whether it's trade or economic cooperation. I'll let Keqiang to go first.
Trade wars are sparking this unprecedented wave of protectionism, and it is highly dangerous. This is why China can do its part in preserving multilateralism by starting a new dialogue with the countries involved.
Jeremy, briefly?
Yes, I would agree, and I think the Belt and Road Initiative, as you speakers have been saying, is very is the best thing that's on the table, the biggest vision that's available. And I think here in Europe, I think we need to work out in more, as you say, the devil's in the detail. We need to work out in detail how to react to it, how to utilize it, what to do about it. And I think that's the way forward.
Nicholas, last but not least.
I think the key is the disengagement of the Trump administration from the international system that the Americans have spent so long trying to build up. And I think all of us, Chinese, Europeans, everybody, we're trying to deal with the fallout of that huge strategic change in the trajectory of the world's biggest military power.
I hope we think hard and we work hard. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Jin Keqiang, Nicholas White, and Jeremy Garlick. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program comes to you Monday to Friday live on CGTN. Still to come on our program, I speak to the Secretary General of the Arab League and find out how China can cooperate with the Arab world in tackling political and security challenges. This is World Inside, and I'm Tian Wei. The program comes to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. The Arab region has often been at the center of international scrutiny, as this resource-rich region has had numerous political upheavals. Yet despite this turmoil, China has kept historically friendly relations with the Arab countries. Now it intends to step up collaboration with the Belt and Road Initiative. From the expansion of the ports in Abu Dhabi to the production of safe nuclear energy in Saudi Arabia, China's modern conception of the ancient Silk Road promises to bring revitalization and prosperity to the region through trade and industrial projects. And on Tuesday, the 8th meeting of the China Arab States Cooperation Forum is set to take place in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet officials from 21 Arab countries to sort out concerns in Sino-Arab relations. On the eve of the forum, I had an exclusive interview with Ahmed Abu Ghait, who is the Secretary General of the Arab League. He shared with me some of the thoughts on current affairs in the Arab world. Mr. Secretary General, welcome to CGTN. What a pleasure to have you here in Beijing.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The world is changing fast, as you may know very well, Mr. Secretary General.
Very much so.
A lot of paradigm shift. So what do you make? Where the world is going from the eyes of the Secretary General of the Arab League?
If we are talking globally and not regionally, I would say that the emergence of China and the impressions China is putting on the international map is very obvious, very clear, economically as well as politically. The world needs a country like China, a developing country, but with that industrialized and economic potential to create enough balance.
Belt and Road Initiative, how much that chance would be for the Arab countries?
You see, We are attending 21 Arab foreign ministers as well as the Secretary General of the Arab League. We are attending a meeting today and tomorrow and yesterday in China in Beijing. And there will be a document signed for implementation of 2 years to come. It is being supported fully by Arab countries because historically the Silk Road has been there between China and Arab Muslim territories towards Mediterranean and Europe. So all you're doing is to renew that effort, and the Arab countries are embracing it, showing great enthusiasm, and I hope that it will be a success, and I'm sure it will be a success.
During the China-Arab Forum, government leaders are preparing to discuss the big elephant in the room, peace in the Arab region. One hot-button topic is the Israeli-Palestinian question after U.S. President Donald Trump recently relocated the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, drawing ire from the international community. Syria is also expected to be on the discussion agenda for some, as over 5 million Syrians have fled the country since the start of its harrowing civil war in 2011. With cities reduced to rubble, Syrian refugees are seeking safety in neighboring Jordan and Lebanon, as well as in Europe, leading to political upheaval throughout the continent.
Imagine that a country like Syria lost possibly $600 billion in damage and destruction, and a country like Syria again, if one tries to rebuild the society as it was, guess what? The cost would be $1 trillion.
That means you have to do your job much harder in a way.
We have first to stabilize Syria. We have to end the civil war. We have to bring a political...
How, the question is?
It is obvious now that we are approaching a point where possibly there will be a permanent ceasefire through the government of President Bashar managing to control the majority of Syrian territory. But the problem there is that he will have to reconcile his differences with the opposition, because if he decides that the opposition is nowhere and that there is no opposition that he should take care of, then he is back to square one, because the end of the insurgency will not stop. It will not stop. You have to accommodate the opposition and the wishes of the Syrian people.
About the Syria issue, of course, this is related to the refugee problem. Some of your states have been shouldering most of the responsibilities, even though they already said very clearly that they cannot anymore, because it's really going to the maximum. Others are still reluctant. So as Secretary General of Arab League, what can you do about that?
First, I have to tell you, there has been those in the West, and that I am very clear of, have been inciting people, rebel against your own governments, show anger against your own governments, and we will support you. The moment such societies erupted and the governments confronted the rebellions, as a consequence of that, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people started leaving their homes and their territory, their lands. The most humane approach was to accept the refugee in your area and the foreign areas, since you were responsible of pushing them to rebel. You were inciting them, not you in China, but in the Western world. Okay, that happened. What we are trying to do is to convince Arab member states, especially the rich of them, and we have a number of rich Arab countries, to finance operations of hosting the Syrian and the Iraqi and other refugees. I often visit places in Jordan who is hosting people beyond its capacity, or Lebanon hosting people beyond their capacity, and I see a great effort being done. A school in Beirut is run for children between 8 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. It is solely Lebanese children in school. Then between 1 to 5 and 5:30 to 8:30 or 9, foreign Arab children attending school, the same school with the same staff.
Can you make the other Arab countries to accept refugees besides the one that you just mentioned?
Arab countries do not limit the entry of the refugee. The problem is the refugee is coming to a country that is also under duress, but they tend to go to Turkey and from Turkey to Greece and EU to find job opportunities and facilities for themselves.
What have you learned from that?
It's the Arab countries are reforming themselves, but Arab population came to recognize that foreign intervention is a curse, and that curse has to be aborted, blocked, stopped, and no one should listen to those who feel as if we are advising you for your good. Actually, often advice is for the interest of those who are claiming it. Israel is something else. Israel is Palestine and the Palestinian problem. Due to the situation that has been developing since January 2011 in the Arab area, people have been focused on developments in Libya, in Tunisia, in Iraq, in Syria, in Egypt.
You're so busy.
I have to admit that the Palestinian problem is the core of every interest in trying to pacify that region.
Right.
And not only this, the Palestinian problem is responsible also for triggering all the events. All Arabs are committed to a Palestinian state. All Arabs are committed to East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state.
What about that now? Because there are so much alternative energies in the world these days. There's a shale gas coming in the United States as well. There's also renewable energy. What about the significance of the Arab countries economically on the world map? And as a result of that, politically as well?
Arabs have a monopoly on possibly 60 to 65% of the oil as well as gas, despite the fact that shale oil or Russia as a major producer. But this is the Arab region that holds to 60 to 65% of the strategic reserve. The area is located geographically in what we call the sun belt and the wind belt, and their renewable energy, whether it is winds or solar. I was in Morocco a few weeks ago, and I noticed great wind farms. In Egypt, great wind farms. In Emirates and in Saudi Arabia, they rely to a large extent not on oil, though they are major producers of oil, but on solar energy.
Exactly.
So they recognize that even if oil's influence or effect is diminishing over the years, at least they have a replacement in solar as well as wind. Not only we recognize, we maintain the best of relationship with a country like the People's Republic of China. And the Chinese came forward with great projects of coordination, of working together, of cooperation in that particular field you are.
China already imported 150 million tons of oil coming from the Arab countries. That accounts for less than 40% of the country's total import of oil. That's already quite a huge number, as you may know, Mr. Secretary.
Because the Chinese economy is enlarging beyond the rate of growth is going up the ceiling, and but the potential is there. Egypt, for instance, struck great discoveries for gas.
Yes.
And the Eastern Mediterranean harbors lots of opportunities in this regard.
Even though OPEC is the organization that correlates the oil output of countries around the world, but Arab League, as one that is heading an organization where most of the oil-producing states are, what do you think is your role and could be your role? Whether it's about oil, whether it's about renewable, how much of that discussion is going on right now about the choices?
Sustainable energy and sustainable development is being coordinated by the Arab League, and we have certain departments that are bringing every Arab country to meetings to coordinate the policies, to disseminate information to them, because not necessarily all of them are acquainted or in the know of whatever that is taking place in the world. But the problem that is facing the Arab League is the events that have taken place in a number of Arab countries that are very important to the cohesion of the Arab League. Syria was a core country. Iraq went through most difficult times since the American invasion of Iraq 2003. Libya is on the verge of disintegrating. Libya is known to produce at least 1.5 million, or was a few years ago. Today it diminished down to 450,000 barrels a day. That affects the importers. The American pressure on countries not to import Iranian oil, that is again putting stress on the Arab producer.
Once lost the market share, do you think it can be regained in the future, or it is going to be very difficult? Are you worried about that?
In what way?
The market share.
Yes. No, because the moment you reduce your ability and you regenerate enough ability to produce, oil is a commodity that everybody is looking for and running after. So no problem that you lose and you continue to lose. If you lose today a market, tomorrow you will gain it again.
Mr. Secretary General, what a pleasure seeing you. Thank you so much for being with us. All the best.
Thank you very much.
That's our exclusive interview with the Secretary General of the Arab League. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.